All right. Well, welcome to the Trails End Lane traffic calming meeting. This is July 9th, 2024, and we're meeting virtually only at 6:30 p.m. As I mentioned, my name is David Greaves. I work with NDOT on a lot of these traffic calming streets. Um, we're excited to be able to talk about Trails End Lane here tonight.
Errol.
Just some
Oh,
housekeeping things. If anyone has questions and prefers not to come off mute to ask them, you're more than welcome to put them into the chat. I've got that up and we'll be monitoring it. So we'll pause a couple of times throughout the presentation for questions, but feel free to throw any in there as well as they come up, and we'll make sure to get them answered. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is just sort of an overview of the program in general, and then we'll zero in on how it applies to Trails End Lane, and then ultimately we'll talk about kind of a rough plan we have in mind and some of the next steps in the program to how it might get implemented. But first, we'll just answer what is traffic calming. This is a neighborhood program, so that NSTC is Neighborhood Street Traffic Calming. We focus on residential streets only, so you will not find us out on the the Gallatin Pikes of the world. Certainly no interstates. Really, just places where people live is what this program is tooled for. We focus on physical solutions to encourage lower speeds over significant lengths. What that means is generally we'll be favoring things like speed cushions or speed tails, perhaps, that really kind of physically affect speeding vehicles rather than speed limits and signs and things of that nature. And then ultimately the goal here is speed reduction, because that is something that causes a reduction in the quality of life for you all who live on Trails End Lane, but it's also quite a safety hazard as well. There are 3 E's in traffic calming. Those are education, enforcement, and engineering. Now, engineering is bold and underlined here because NDOT is really able to affect the design of streets. We can also do a little bit of education like we're doing tonight on a meeting such like this. And then enforcement is in the domain of Metro's police department. So that's not something that NDOT has a lot of control over. And while we would love for them to be, enforcing speeds all over the place all the time, it's just not a realistic demand that we're able to make. So we try to find other solutions to speeding, that really work at all times. Circling back to kind of the purpose of this program, it really is in pursuit of Vision Zero. So that's a safety initiative that imagines that no one has to die or be seriously injured on Nashville's public roadways. The reason speed factors so heavily into that is laid out in this chart. Essentially, the faster a car is going, if they were to hit a person outside of a car, the lower their chances of surviving that. So at 25 miles an hour, the speed limit of a lot of our neighborhood streets, there's not a perfect chance, but there's a much higher chance that somebody who gets hit is going to make it out alive. But as those speeds increase to 35, that goes down to just over 2/3. And then at 45, that really tanks down to just like 1/3, that 35%. So when we see speeds that are kind of in that upper range, we know that it's really important to bring those down, particularly in places where people might be walking or using the roadways in other ways. This is a really high demand program. We've been pleased that it's super popular, but it does mean that we have a lot of applications on file. When Trails End Lane was chosen in March of 2023, there were around 480 other streets, who have applied but have not yet been selected. So you all were one of the top 25 that was chosen in March of 2023. That's a good thing because it means we'll have the opportunity to make some changes, but it's a bad thing because out of all those neighborhoods, this was one that was observed to be the most in need. So we recognize y'all are seeing some serious problems here, and we're hoping that by some of the design proposals we have, we can improve that situation for you.
Oh, hello.
There are a few things that the traffic calming program does a lot of and does well, and then there are also a lot of things that sort of fall outside of the scope of projects we do. Perfect example would be things like sidewalks or bike lanes. We're not really able to do that here. But for anything that we may come upon that this project can't address, we want to make sure everyone is aware that Hub Nashville is a resource for requesting just about anything from Metro government. That can be accessed by calling 311. It's also hub.Nashville.gov. And there's also an app that you can download. That's sort of my preferred method because I tend to submit a good amount of requests. So yeah, just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that as a resource that is at your disposal. Before we get too much further, I want to pause and see, does anyone on the phone or on the call have any questions about what we've covered so far?
I'm on the phone and
I'm seeing my picture, so I don't know if I'm on both. This is
It sounds like maybe you are. I'm getting a bit of an echo.
So do I get off my picture or stay on the phone?
Maybe leave the phone and then you'll be able to see the slides.
Oh, you're echoing. Do you want me to get off the picture?
Either one is fine.
Okay. What's the password for the video?
Let's see. There is an access code that I think that you can use for dialing in. I don't know if there is a password that you need to access. Is somebody having trouble accessing the WebEx meeting?
I am, yes.
Got it. I'm not exactly sure what might be going on, but why don't we keep going? Feel free to kind of mess around with it as you can. But if you aren't able to see the video now, what we can do is make sure that you've got the link to the slides after the meeting, and you can kind of review anything that we talk about that you maybe wanted to see.
You have yours, Gordon, you got your settings open for camera and video?
Yeah, we should be sharing my screen. So I think that most people on the call, if they're using their computers, are able to see it.
Okay, because I'm on the screen now, Carol, and I've got you on my, you're okay, you're on my phone, I mean, on my audio.
Great.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Well, did you talk about Trails End Lane? I just got on late because there's 5 of us on here on Trails End Lane. So what did you say?
Got it. So we talked for about 10 minutes or so, just about the traffic calming program in general. We haven't reviewed the design yet, but we kind of just gave some broad information about the program.
Okay, thank you, David.
Sure. Okay, well, I will go ahead and continue the presentation. Of course, feel free to throw questions into the chat as they come up, and I'll pause a couple more times throughout. I will go ahead and kind of make sure that folks are on mute so we don't get as much of that echoing and background noise, but anyone is welcome to come off when it's time to ask questions. Okay, so what we're looking at here, that pie chart, is how we prioritize those 500-ish traffic calming applications that come in. Basically, what we do is send out some data collection equipment and measure how fast vehicles are traveling on the road, and how many vehicles are traveling on the road. We combine that with some data about sidewalks and schools and parks, and ultimately that generates a score that pushed you all to kind of that top 25. We do consider the speeds and the volume, that's how many cars are driving down Trails End Lane, quite heavily, because ultimately those are the two things combined that result in the danger of traffic accidents and related incidents. So Trails End Lane specifically, here's some of the data that we collected. The 85th percent speed, it was 35 miles an hour. I believe that y'all's is signed at 30. So speeding wasn't incredibly high. We've seen upwards of 39, sometimes even 42. 35 is certainly over the speed limit, but not as bad as we've seen on other streets. And then the daily volume was 1,245 vehicles that crossed that path. It's a relatively narrow street, so 20 feet is just about the minimum that NDOT tries to design roadways to. So when we look at kind of the tools in our toolbox, we'll talk about how that width will affect some of the design decisions that we're going to make. For some context, this is a map of Trails End Lane. And we can see it stretches all the way from Elm Hill Pike to the north to Bell Road on the west. And this sort of street layout is one that we sort of start to suspect that maybe some of the traffic you're seeing is cutting through between those two. We're not sure. There's not really a great way to find out definitively, but seeing a layout like this on a traffic calming street, that's something that does come up from time to time. Some of the colors we're seeing on this, the green line means that you've been selected and we're in kind of that meeting and design phase. Those purple lines are streets that have applied and not yet been selected. So I think that says Sandberg Place is one and East Lake Drive is another in your immediate neighborhood who have applied for traffic calming, but didn't make it into that group that was selected in March. So next we're going to talk about some of the tools we have in our toolkit. So some of the options that we have when we put together traffic calming designs. And then after that, we're going to take a look at the concept that we've developed for Trails End Lane that we'd love to get your feedback on. So I'll pause at the end of this section and take any questions about sort of the tools we have, and then we'll move on to the next section where we talk design solutions. So the first one we always talk about is speed cushions. That's because it's by far the most common traffic calming measure that we implement in Nashville. And the reason for that is they tend to work the best for the amount of impact they have. Essentially, what we want is something that everyone is affected by. We don't want to just lower the speed limit and then those who want to speed still can. But anyway, the rubber modular devices that we bolt on to the surface of the road, and they act sort of like speed bumps. They're actually way longer, and that results in a higher target speed. So rather than going like 5 to 10 miles an hour, like we might in a parking lot or some other place you'd see speed bumps, these are stretched out to create a target speed of around 20, 25 miles an hour. So we're not hoping people go really slow over these. They're really designed to just get folks closer to the speed limit that's already there. They're 3 inches high. They're 6 feet wide. That's a very deliberate choice. Essentially, that 6-foot number comes from the desire to impact smaller vehicles that we might drive to work or elsewhere, but not so wide that they're going to affect larger vehicles like fire trucks or perhaps ambulances quite as much. They still may touch these as they go over, but they've got these kind of tapered sides The hope being that they wouldn't be impacted as much. They come in a variety of lengths as well. That sort of depends on target speed. That'd be 7 foot, 10.5 foot, and 14. So that cross section we're looking at in the bottom left corner, that's one of the 10.5 foot long speed cushions. So you can see it sort of ramps up and then is flat for a few feet and then ramps back down. Similar to speed cushions are speed tables. These essentially are made out of the exact same materials, but they're configured in such a way to stretch all the way across the road. And these we don't tend to rely on because they don't come with that benefit of a lesser impact on emergency vehicles. But we do bring them out from time to time. Kind of the classic case is if there's a roadway that has a width such that you can't really do the job with 2, but you can't quite fit in 3, that would maybe be a good spot to consider one of these. I said that these two combined, the vertical measures, are sort of NDOT's preferred method for a traffic calming project, and that's because we know they work pretty well. So this data that we're looking at here is from a study NDOT conducted before and after several traffic calming projects, and they observed good results. So on the left, that average speed went down from 31 miles an hour to 22. The 85th percent speed went down from 37 to 25. Now, I assume there are people who don't know what 85th percent speed means. So essentially what that is it functions like a median. It essentially 15% of folks measured were going faster than that number, and then 85% of folks were going slower than that number or the number itself. So the reason it's a traffic calming or traffic engineering data point that's used to analyze these things quite often. There are a number of other things that we use to supplement our designs. There are plenty of cases where speed cushions alone don't quite meet all of the goals that we may have. And one of those things are radar feedback signs. So I think we've all seen one of these, but essentially it's a device that reads the speed that somebody's going and then displays it back at them. I think it'll turn red if you're going like too fast. And the idea here is that if it's in a spot that you may be speeding inadvertently, like a steep long hill perhaps, where you'd have to be kind of like riding the brakes to go the appropriate speed limit, they can serve as a reminder to drivers of how fast they're going versus how fast they should be going. We do see an average reduction of 6 to 7 miles an hour or so. We're not sure if that's completely indefinite long-term effects or if they wear off, but they do have an impact, and we're able to put them in places where we can't always put speed cushions. Hills, for example, is kind of the classic example. We can also do narrowing. So what that is where we take the edge of the road and bring it in visually with paint. So you can see the asphalt itself is quite wide on this road, but we've striped white edge lines to sort of shrink the lanes up a bit. And that makes drivers perceive less space that is dedicated to them, and that can subtly slow down speeds a bit, but not as much as vertical measures might. Another benefit here is on roads that are wide enough, it can add comfort for pedestrians because you sort of know, I'm in this space, you're in that, we're not going to collide here. So that can help, but it's sort of a tangential benefit. Now, I will say this probably will not be an option we entertain on Trails End Lane because you all are already sort of that minimum width that we're able to design our streets around. So there's not much more narrowing we can do without really just having one lane for 2 directions. Another thing we can do with pretty wide roadways and roadways with really big intersections are bulb outs. This works the same way as narrowing, but for turning movements. Basically, we shrink an intersection down and provide less space for vehicles to use to turn, and that forces slower speeds. So we all know when we're merging onto the interstate, for instance, those are really wide, big sweeping curves that we're able to drive quite fast on. whereas a sharper curve, we have to slow down to a much slower speed to make that maneuver. And that's a benefit because often in places where people might be crossing or connecting between two sidewalks, we don't really want people taking turns super fast because they may not see if somebody's in a crosswalk or about to cross. We can also do chicanes on wider roads. That's where we take what was formerly a really wide straight road and narrow it down and then kind of zigzag that center line back and forth. By doing that, you're not able to really just lay on the gas and gun it down the street. You sort of have to carefully maneuver through it, which slows speeds just inherently. We do try to do this carefully though, because it can affect how much on-street parking there is, and we're not really looking to limit that in any serious ways. Similar to narrowing, this probably won't lay out super well on Trails End just because we don't have that much space to work with. And then lastly, we have traffic circles. So these are for intersections that are really even larger than the ones that bulb outs are appropriate for. They take up a good amount of space, and they work the same way though, essentially forcing vehicles to maneuver around it at an intersection, and by doing so pay a little more attention to their environment rather than just blowing right through like you might if it was a straight street. So that's it on the tools section. The next slide is a concept design that we've sort of pulled together. But before we move on, I want to pause and just see if there's any questions from the group on anything we've covered so far. I see Carol has got her hand raised. Let's see. Carol, you may need to unmute yourself before we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. All right, can you hear me? Okay,
Yes.
so I've got a couple of questions. Number one, have you been down Trails End Lane yourself?
Not yet. So the next step that we'll do after this meeting is conduct a site visit where we visit Trails End Lane, take some measurements, confirm that roadway width that we've seen from aerial imagery, and then really just do any other observations. So if there are things that you would like us to look out for while we're there, this would be a great time to let us know, and we can sort of go do that visit with that in mind.
Okay, there's 5 of us, 5 of my neighbors that are on this with you right now. I'm
here.
32.7. Oh, okay, there's 6 of us. 32.73, which is as you're coming from Bell Road down the hill. So all of us are seeing excessive speeds over 35.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, coming down that hill, they're zooming down that hill. And when they go up it, they're gassing it at Sandberg and zooming up the hill. The other thing is, I don't know, how did you measure that speed of 35? Because I mean, I've been here, sir, for 32 years, and I've had the police come and do a monitor on speeds. Back in, I'm going to say early 90s, it was 55 miles per hour.
Mm-hmm.
How are you getting that 35? Because it doesn't seem realistic.
Yeah, understood. So it's important to remember that the 35 miles an hour, that's not the maximum. That means that there are 15% of people going any speed above 35. So you could have lots of people going, 40s and 50s even. And certainly that would skew that number upwards. But it's not an average necessarily. It's just one data point. But the other thing that I want to make sure is really clear to everyone on the call is that we know that there's a problem here, and we've already selected Trails End Lane. So there's nothing besides the voting that we'll talk about later in the presentation that would prevent us from doing some project here.
Okay, I'd
So
also
whether
like
it's 35 or 50, we know that y'all are in need of some help, and we're here.
I'd also like to mention one other thing. Having lived here, and we all have gone through this, we don't get much snow here, but when we do, that street coming from Bell Road down is treacherous. I think almost everybody has lost a mailbox or two. They don't stop coming down. That's like bumper cars. One year I did call and they put the horses up at the top of the street. So we've got a problem with them coming down even in the times when the weather's bad. So my question is, if you put a speed bump or speed, not a bump, but those tables sound good. If you put them over in front of either my house or like say within that general area, I have this sign. I don't know if you can see it. Every year I have to put this sign up. Gas it or you won't get up the hill because that hill turns right in front of the Andersons' home. So you lose the momentum if you're going 20 miles an hour, and then all these cars back down and they crash. And we've had to call police and tow trucks. So I don't know, you just need to be aware of that when placing them. And I suppose once you come here and take a look, then you can will you let us know what you decide before you do it?
Yeah, and we'll talk about when you can see the final design in a little bit.
All right,
And I
I'm
will
sorry.
mention that yes, we do not place vertical measures like speed cushions or tables on hills that are too steep for them. So that threshold that we use is between 6 and 7%. That's really not that steep. There's quite a few sections on Trails End Lane that we've already identified as being too steep for these cushions to really work well, and we'll design around that. So certainly we don't want anyone getting trapped on these or hung up. We definitely know in Nashville that snow can cause issues on streets that are steeper than most. So yeah, we'll be careful in considering how that is affected.
I have a question. I'm just on the phone though, so I can't raise my hand.
Sure.
So I live at the opposite end of Trails End where you turn off of Elm Hill. And there is a stop sign that is right before my driveway that people blow through. And I'm really hoping that that you just pay attention to putting speed bumps somewhere so that it will make people have to slow down so that they can't just blow through that stop sign. I was turning into my driveway and was almost T-boned because someone was flying through the stop sign and tried to go around the person behind me thinking they were driving too slow and almost ran into me. So that stop sign is just completely disregarded most of the time. So I just wanted to make sure that that was out there.
Yeah, thank you for that. It sounds like we're getting some questions about the design in particular. So I'm going to just go ahead and move on to the concept that we have so we can just sort of all take a look and I'll speak to it a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and just give a brief description for the folks on the phone who may not be able to see the screen. But what we're looking at, starting from Elm Hill Pike, that's the northern end, is one set of speed cushions between those two stop signs. So before Quail Road, if you're heading south, and then one pretty soon after it, maybe 200-300 feet, but just before White Pine Drive. After that, there's that pretty steep stretch, the hill that I think was mentioned earlier. So we'll go past Quail Run Court before we get to where we're able to place our next set of speed cushions. The following one will be somewhere near Sandberg Place. And then we're going to look at fitting in one more toward the end before Bell Road. So the goal here is to space these out as evenly as we can and at a spacing that allows for folks to not have to be going over these constantly as they're using Trails End Lane, but not leaving so much space that they're able to get back up to dangerous speeds in between cushions. So we are able to do that for the most part here. I'll say whenever we have streets with like longer, steeper hills, it creates a natural interruption where we just aren't able to safely put speed cushions on it. But what we do is try to put measures at the top and the bottom so that by the time you get to that hill, you've already sort of driven over a couple of indications that you shouldn't be going fast. And the slower you start a hill like that, the less speed you get up to by the time you're at the top or the bottom. So it's not the perfect design, but I think it's a pretty good one, and it's what I think is about the best we're able to do with the tools at our disposal. And for those that can't see and didn't follow all that, start to finish, there's 5 locations that we're proposing that will have speed cushions along the full length of Trails End Lane. So with that, I'm happy to take more questions about really anything we've covered so far, but other things that y'all want us to know before we finalize this design is really what we're looking to get.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello. I got a question for you. We need to slow this traffic down. That's a good way to do it. When we're going to put a light at the end of Trails End Lane and up Bell Road? We've been trying to get one for about 7-8 years, and they ain't got one yet. That will slow traffic down.
No, well, I don't know, but go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. So that is a great thing that we can request by hub. Installing traffic signals is not something that the traffic calming project is able to do. It's much more of a kind of intersection control device. Typically, that'll correspond to higher volumes or a number. I think there's a few different factors that can all go into the decision to install a signal. But it's not one that we're gonna like study in depth as a part of this project.
I could say something on that. Like I said, I've been here for 32 years, and we did try to get a stoplight there, sir. Probably, I'm going to say longer than 7 or 8 years. And here's what they found out. At that time, it was going to be $55,000 to put that stoplight there. But the problem is because of the hill that's there, before you get down to Bell Road, you're going to have rear enders going into the main traffic of Bell Road. So that's what they decided was it wouldn't be cost effective or safe having a stoplight at the bottom of that hill. So with that, I'm just gonna mute out again.
Well, thank you so much for providing that that context. It's not something I was aware of since I haven't been involved for that long. But yeah, it sounds like it's been brought up before and studied, but maybe not super recently. So appreciate you chiming in with that history for us. Any other thoughts, questions, things we should look out for?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I've been here for over 25 years. I've seen people racing side by side on Trails End Lane, running 80, 90 mile an hour, almost going in ditches. I mean, this is almost every day. So this plan you got here will work. But the thing of it is, you got to get it done.
What is it slated?
Just talking about it don't do nothing.
Hang on. Is it slated for a particular time to get done once it passes?
Yeah.
We can talk about that next.
Okay.
If there's any questions that pertain to the actual like locations of the cushions or anything, feel free. Otherwise, I'm happy to move on now and sort of talk about the next steps, how this project will proceed, and all that. Does that sound good?
Sorry, do you have an address for that one, the last one on the going towards Bell Road? Do you have the number address on that Trails End Lane one?
No. So what we're looking at here is kind of a rough concept. These aren't exact locations of the cushions. What we'll do when we go out and do our site visit is take some pretty detailed measurements about the grades and make sure that we don't place these anywhere improper. And then once we finalize that design is when we'll have really specific locations kind of down to the foot of exactly where these will land. But I can sort of talk about that in the next slide if you'd like to move on, sort of the timeline. Cool. So the timeline we're looking at here is a flowchart of one traffic calming project moving through the program. So we can see in the top left, that's the application. So for anyone who doesn't know, Trails End Lane did submit an application to NDOT asking for this project to happen. We then moved on to that prioritization and selection process we discussed earlier in the meeting. And we are here at that red circle neighborhood meeting. So this was advertised through mailer postcards, and we've sort of reviewed the concept design, toolbox, all that stuff. As I mentioned before, the next step is the design phase of the project. So we're going to come out and do a field review, take some measurements of Trails End Lane, and then really refine that concept based on the feedback we're getting tonight. After that, there is a fork in the road. We can either schedule a second meeting with the full design where we come back and sort of review that in detail, catch anyone up who wasn't able to make this meeting, get any more feedback if that is thought to be necessary, and then move on to the online ballot. If y'all would prefer, we can skip that second meeting and then post our plans online for your review, and then do that online ballot. I do see a question in the chat that I'll read and answer for y'all. So the question was, will we place any cushions in front of anyone's driveway? The answer is an emphatic no. So one of the guidelines we use when placing cushions is that we try really hard not to be within 15 feet between the edge of a cushion and the edge of someone's driveway. That doesn't work perfectly in every neighborhood, but we always do the best we can to stay as far away as we can. And the reason for that is we don't want anyone, blocked in or having to drive over these as they're maneuvering in and out of their So back to the ballot. Essentially, when we're ready to vote as a group on whether or not this project will move forward, we're going to send similar postcards to the ones that we mailed for this meeting. They'll have a code on them, and we'll either call into NDOT or go online and submit a yes or a no vote. Once that either passes or doesn't pass, if it passes, the project will go into construction. So the timeline for that is about 8 to 10 months. We hope that we can get it done faster than that, but at the moment, there's quite a large backlog of projects that NDOT is working on building. So there are some streets that have been waiting for like a year-ish already, and they've seen some good progress in kind of the speed of installation. But we just want to make sure that y'all are aware it's not going to be, tomorrow if these get approved. There is a bit of a queue for having these installed. Any questions about the timeline or kind of that second meeting, first meeting decision we have? And I see that somebody has asked about who is voting. I will address that on the next slide. So if you'll be patient with me, we'll answer that very soon. So just question to the group. Does anyone have a preference on whether or not we schedule a second one of these meetings to review a more detailed design? Or would you prefer to review the detailed design online and then go straight to the vote?
Can you say that? I don't know. Skip it.
Skip it.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I think that's probably a good decision. There's not a lot of flexibility with the design we're going to be able to put forth.
Yeah, I think it would be a waste of time. I think it would be a waste
Yeah, it's a waste of time. Just
to have a second meeting.
Understood. So we'll make that the plan. If I don't hear anything else otherwise, I think that'll work great. I do see a question about like the timeline, roughly a year before they're constructed. Again, that's our best guess. You know, we can't see that far into the future, unfortunately. Everything goes well, NDOT will be building these a little faster than that, and hopefully we can beat that 8 to 10 month estimate. But yes, it will be a substantial amount of time from you all approving the project to NDOT being able to install it once it gets to the front of that line. All right. Well, with that, we can talk about the balloting, and then in the next slide, sort of who is receiving that ballot postcard. But this is the postcard. Essentially, that top left image there is what you can expect to receive in the mail. In the bottom left-hand corner, it'll have a unique ID code that'll be used to enter into the online ballot form. Or if you choose to call in, you'll tell it to the person on the phone. That's so we can make sure that all of the votes we receive are legitimate, and no one's like voting 10 times or things like that. The ballot period will open when we send out all those postcards, and it will remain open for 6 weeks. So we think that's a good amount of time because it's not an excessively long period, but we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to receive the postcard. And then if you choose to, talk to your neighbors and make sure everyone around you sort of knows what's going on, we like to leave some time for that to happen because we know that not everyone on your street is able to join meetings like this and, get this information directly. A project will move forward if 66% of those who respond vote yes. So that's not 66% of everyone on the street. It's just of those who vote. So it works like any other election, really. So about who is getting these ballot postcards, essentially it is any owner of a parcel whose property line abuts the affected right-of-way. So you can see this map. Each of these yellow properties are ones that are touching Trails End Lane. So even if you're on the corner and your address is Quail Road, but your side yard is Trails End, you'll receive one of these as well. You only get one vote per person. So owners with multiple properties will only send you one postcard. And it's also one vote per property. So if you have 2 people living there, it's only one vote. If you have 10, it's still only one vote. And then things like condos, so kind of up in this northwestern end, we've got several like subdivided parcels. Those are all included because we know even if the building's line isn't touching Trails End, in reality, that's where you are. So this is sort of that map there. Operating businesses are not eligible. What that means is like a mechanic or a sandwich shop or something. It doesn't mean if your property is owned by like such and such trust, that would be included. So basically anywhere that we see that it's like a residence is not excluded from this list. And then lastly, churches and schools. I don't think you have churches or schools on here, but if you do, they would each get a vote as well. Any questions about the ballot postcards or the balloting criteria?
Yeah, I'm sorry, David. I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, I do own 3 properties on Trails End Lane. They're all individual properties. So do I get 1 vote or will I get 3 votes?
You will get 1.
Okay, so, all right, well, that's not fair for the street. If I own 3, shouldn't I get 3 votes?
It's just the policy that we have.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to clarify that it's more than 1 on the street.
Understood.
Okay, all right, thank you. Oh, while you're here, Can I ask you, when we get these speed bumps, whatever, is the city then gonna come out and shovel the snow when we get it? Will we be on a list? Do you know, do we get our street shoveled?
So these do not correlate really with snowplow routes. Sometimes they're on snowplow routes, sometimes they're not, but the snowplowed streets aren't decided based on where cushions are.
All right, and then does the money to pay for this come out of the general fund? I mean, we won't get extra taxes on our bill for this?
You will not get extra taxes for these. Yes, it's funded by Metro Nashville.
All right, and my last question, on the radar device that you have where they have the speed, is it possible, I don't know if this is happening, but we don't have front license plates in this state, which unfortunately is not a good thing, but there's back license plates. So those people that are speeding, let's say 5 or 10 miles over the speed limit, can a picture be taken of their license plate?
So the radar feedback signs do not have cameras and they don't take pictures.
Okay.
If I understand correctly, automated speed enforcement isn't allowed in all of Tennessee, or at the very least, Nashville does not have a program to automatically enforce speed limits with cameras.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? We can circle back to any part of the presentation. We're here to, you know, as long as y'all have things to talk about, I'm happy to talk about them. Yes.
Yeah. I have a question. I just put it in chat too. My husband and I drive Trails End every single day, multiple times a day. We live off of Sandburg. So is there a way that we can see the plans? I know we can't vote, but since there's not going to be another meeting, is there a way we can see plans and give feedback?
Yeah, so the plans will be posted to NDOT's website before the voting mailer cards are sent out. We're not going to do like a broader public announcement to, you know, like the whole district or anything once it happens, but certainly they'll be available online while voting is happening, and you're more than welcome to check them out. And then feel free, anyone on the call, to contact us at these email addresses. Mine is david.greaves@kimleyhorn.com. If you do reach out to me, I ask that you also copy NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.com or at Nashville.gov. And then they'll also be in the loop. So we're all sort of on the same page. I see a question that is, how do we report if the speed cushions need to be repaired? It's a great question. The answer is Hub Nashville. That's like almost always the fastest way to get the attention from Nashville that something needs fixing, and often they're very quick about things that are hazardous, such as a broken speed cushion. It sounds like Councilmember Bradford will make sure that folks are aware via Facebook and the newsletter. So thank you, Councilmember. That's hugely helpful. And yeah, feel free to kind of just spread the word around your neighborhood as you please. It's no big secret or anything. We just only send mail to those that are voting.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear when you said the ballots were coming out. I missed that.
Oh, you know, I don't think I actually told you. So we are going to finish our design and then post the plans online and then mail those cards. So the design process usually takes around 2 months. That just allows us time to do our site visit, come back, digest it, you know, kind of refine that design a little bit before we seal it up and send it on to you all. So in the neighborhood of two months from tonight, if we're skipping that second meeting, is when we'll go ahead and send out those postcards. But I will say, when we send those out, talk to your neighbors and just make sure that they know they're coming. We do often see instances of them being mistaken as junk mail or just maybe never delivered. So if you think you should get a postcard and your neighbor has, or you saw it on the Facebook group, but you haven't gotten one yet, you can always reach out to us. We're happy to give you the information you need to access the plans and then ultimately vote. So we have, is the decision for cushions final, or are the tables also an option? We will likely proceed with cushions, and the reason for that is on a 2-lane, 20-foot wide road, we don't feel like tables do a whole lot more to cover that width of roadway than 2 cushions will. Essentially, they're close enough together that no vehicle is able to dodge it completely. So it's a little more effective for us to use cushions in this particular scenario.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you maybe bring back that slide again?
Sure. Which one?
The cushions one.
Yes, this one.
Is that it? So which ones is which ones are you all referring to?
Oh yeah. So these are speed cushions. This is what we've proposed on Trails End Lane. So basically, we'll probably have 2 side by side, since Trails End Lane is pretty narrow as roadways go. We don't need to do 3 or 4 to cover the width of asphalt that you all have. Does that kind of, oh, go ahead.
It looks to me like it would be fairly easy to straddle the 2.
Do you mean like sneak a car in between them, or go off to the
One set of tires on each side.
Oh, most cars don't have wheelbases that wide, actually. Like if you were to go right in the center of it, I think both wheels would go up and over. And unless you're like driving a really huge like modified vehicle, they
A
would
lot of
maybe
people do drive really large vehicles, so I don't know.
I know, and don't get me started on our vehicle design regulations, because that's not something I can affect a whole lot. But yeah, for the most part, these are effective at achieving the goals, and those that are driving like really
Okay.
large trucks and things around. There's not a whole lot we can throw at those that aren't going to be really impactful to what most people drive.
Okay, coming in again. We've got properties. I mean, there's homes on Sandburg. There's 3 motorcycles. They'll go right down the middle of that. They travel 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, coming home or going out. I don't know, but they're Harley Davidson. So what happens there?
Yeah, we do get this question from time to time, and we do recognize that motorcycles are kind of an interesting case where we're not able to completely negate the fact that they will still use the road on 2 wheels, and in certain instances like this be able to either go through the cushions or around them. But really, in either case, we don't have a lot of ability to control their volume with these, so it's not a problem that traffic calming in particular is able to address super well. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks,
yeah,
David. So we'll hear from you before the balloting as far as the design, right?
At the very least, you will get some Facebook or newsletter notification once we post
I
it.
don't do Facebook, so hopefully a newsletter. Okay.
Right, and then you will get your postcard in the mail that directs you to look at the plans we've posted, and all of that.
Okay, thank you for your time, David. Appreciate you.
Yeah, and anytime. I will say I do have a another question. I'll go ahead and answer, but feel free to jump off if you're ready. So, street that has cushions installed for those who haven't encountered them yet. That is a good question, and I'm gonna try to look up really quick for you where the nearest one is, and then let you
Okay,
know.
I've got you covered, David. Over on Castlegate, which is off of Smith Springs, they first put stop signs. It didn't work. They've got 6 of them there. 6 on Castlegate. Just go down Smith Springs Road, make a right on Castlegate at the light. There's 6 of them. You cannot go more than 15 miles over those.
Great, thank you so much for that, Carol. Appreciate you with the local knowledge. And then someone else reported Lakeland Drive behind Sonic is another place where they've been installed. So either of those spots are examples of other projects. And I realized I never answered the question about having considered adding stop signs as traffic calming. That's something that we really aren't able to do through this program. And the reason for that is stop signs as intended to be designed are not for the purpose of slowing down vehicles. They're answering the question, who should go when while interacting with an intersection. So we heard earlier that people just kind of blow through the stop sign on Quail Road. We see that happen more and more on streets that have stop signs that maybe don't belong at a given intersection. Certainly we could put one at every intersection in town, but we would expect to see a lot more disregard for them as a result. And at times that can be even more dangerous than not having them at all. So that's our bit about stop signs to whoever put that question in the chat. Well, once again, everyone, thank you so much for joining the call. This is a QR code to Nashville's traffic calming website. The NDOT also has a social media presence. They can be found there. And then once again, feel free to reach out to me and NDOT Traffic Calming at Nashville.gov with any feedback that you have between now and the project being implemented. We're happy to hear from you, and we'll answer just about any questions you have.
Hey, David, this is Councilman Bradford. I put in the chat, anyone who's interested in signing up for my newsletters that have not done so, they can go to russbradford.com/newsletter, or they can just send me an email, russ.bradford@Nashville.gov, and I'll get them added to the list.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. Really appreciate that you're helping to spread the word about this program and this project. All right, well, I will stop the recording. And y'all have an excellent night. It was really a pleasure to talk with you all, and appreciate your time this evening, offering your feedback on this project.